A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum again to our guest here at the Academia Library. I just need to do a very small introduction for the folks online. One of our live streams has only started now, and we're about 2-3 hours into the program already. So just to recap, this is a critical issue seminar by Seekers Guidance. We're here in Cape Town, and this event is a collaboration between Seekers Guidance, the Global Islamic Seminary, and Al Academia or Al Ikhlas Academia Library, which is where we are, as well as Voice of the Cape Radio. We've heard from two of our scholars for this afternoon, Sheikh Muhammad Carr and Sheikh Irshaad Sedick. And the topic of this seminar is the fiqh of social media. For the people who are only joining us now on the live stream, inshallah, the former segments that we have covered already will inshallah be made available online. At this point, we are going to continue with Sheikh Muhammad Carr. He's going to end off his segment called Etiquettes of Social Media and the Digital Space. And then, inshallah, both scholars will address the topic, how much is enough? And then, inshallah, we'll go to Q&A. So, as I said earlier, please send your questions forward on a piece of paper, or during the Q&A, you can stand, inshallah, and ask your questions. Jazakallah khair. Sheikh Muhammad.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, we thank and praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for affording us the opportunity to come together. No two people come together and move apart except by the will and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for affording us the opportunity to come to a gathering whereby we seek to acquire such knowledge that will guide us to and guide us along the straight path and ultimately gain proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're living in a time where we all seek to be connected. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala connect us to Him, and if we connected to Him, by extension we connected to everything else of meaning. The next issue we're going to be looking at would be the idea of neutrality, and also the idea of us overestimating our own ability in terms of dealing with social media. I think sometimes we overestimate our ability to filter between what is good and what is bad, almost as if to a certain degree we are immune to potential negative impacts on ourselves. Whereas if we look at the most elite group, and those were the messengers, look at Yusuf alayhi salam as an example. He said, "Oh Allah, وَإِلَّا تَصْرِفْ عَنِّي كَيْدَهُنَّ أَصْبُ إِلَيْهِنَّ." If you do not avert their plans and their plots from me, then I will fall prey to their plots and plans. So he was very skeptical about his own ability in terms of being able to filter through good and bad. If that's a messenger of Allah, what about you and me? So it's about like standing in front of a fire and telling yourself, I don't feel hot, but rather I feel cool. So it's very important that we don't overestimate our own ability when going into or moving on to treacherous ground, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So the first thing we look at here is that social media, is it a potential distraction? What I was thinking about was, in relation to social media, what is the ruling? We're talking about the fiqh of social media. What is the ruling? There are many instances, and I'll cite one example very quickly. Marriage. What is the legal ruling of marriage? There's not a single ruling. It's a very relative ruling. If you by the ability to get married, then it's recommended. If you not by the means to get married, then it's not recommended. It's a very relative ruling. Likewise, engaging on social media, there's not one ruling. It's a relative ruling depending on the nature of the social media, and also depending on where you find yourself in. I'm thinking of another example which I haven't thought before about before. if you pick up something, so a lost item, you can pick it up with the idea of returning it to its owner, and you can pick it up with the idea of assuming ownership thereof, obviously when you follow certain conditions. So again, relative to the person, the ruling changes. So if you wanted to say, al-umur bimaqasidiha, that things are judged by the objective. So if you're exercising, for example, but you're exercising to strengthen yourself so that you can pray better, fast better, then exercising becomes an act of worship. If you're using social media as a productivity tool, which some people do, and then al-umur bimaqasidiha, productive in what sense? Productive in a positive sense, and then you'll be rewarded for using social media. So, but by and large, we find that social media is a distraction and something that we need to be wary of. So in conclusion, my first point would be, in terms of my understanding, there's not one blanket ruling to social media. It depends on a number of factors. In other words, the ruling is relative. There's not a blanket statement, like it's impermissible. It's going to be impermissible if you're using it as a means to something which is impermissible. But if you're not, and then the ruling obviously changes. The next issue, if we look at social media, the real life example, in other words, the major premise would be a marketplace. So entering into a social media space is like entering into a market space. So is it permissible to enter into a market space? Absolutely. But the narration of the Prophet ﷺ holds that though it's permissible, you go there on a needs basis. You have a need, you go to fulfill the need, and therefore you exit the market. Because the market is the place of material goods. So the most beloved place to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be the places of worship. The most disliked place in the eyes of Allah would be the marketplace. Why? Because the potential for waywardness within the marketplace is greater than elsewhere. So likewise, when you enter into a social media space, the potential for waywardness in that particular space is great. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. I would advise that when you are entering into the space, it is advised when we enter into the market space, there's a certain supplication of the Prophet ﷺ, and it is what we know to be the fourth word, al-kalimatul rabi'ah, which reads as follows: La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, lahul mulk wa lahul hamd, yuhyi wa yumit, huwa al-hayyu alladhi la yamut, biyadihi al-khayr wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. There are different wordings, but basically what it amounts to is that if you enter into the marketplace, you want to acquire material goods, but you're also reminding yourself that the owner of all goods is Allah. So when you enter into the social space, all spaces belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is good, what is bad, it is in the control of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. بِيَدِهِ الْخَيْرِ. In His hands lies all goodness. So again, if you're coming into a market space, you're coming into the social space, I would recommend, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, that you actually pronounce the fourth kalima and invoke the fourth kalima. It will create a sense of consciousness when we engage on this particular space. And if you have some time, Google it, get the fourth kalima, and ponder over the words bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The next issue which we are looking at, oh, I see, this one comes up. Okay, etiquette. So we spoke about etiquette, and we said that you have necessary etiquette, in other words, you must do, and then you have recommended etiquettes. Necessary etiquette, what you must do, what you mustn't do. Recommended etiquette, what basically makes up for suaveness, gentility. What makes you a gentleman on a social media platform? What makes you a lady in a social media platform? That's what it's all about, suaveness, to be a lady and to be a gentleman. We're going to be looking at that bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, you know, if you belong to a group, a WhatsApp group, that WhatsApp group has an administrator. The administrator, he will impose the rules of that particular group. So like every administrator has rules, if we take a step back from an executive level, in terms of Quran and the way of the Prophet ﷺ, we have our own rules, our own etiquettes, do's and don'ts, recommended, not recommended. So it's important that myself as a Muslim, after I've invoked the invocation, I'm entering into the space. Irrespective of what rules the admin of the group might have, we come with our own set of rules, divine rules, rules that are designed in a way that will bring a benefit to us and push away a certain harm. So it's important to keep those in mind. where do we get this from? There's a very famous narration of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I came to discover very recently that it is reported by Bukhari and Muslim. So the narration is authentic. It's vigorously authenticated. It's the narration of the road. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he stumbled across his companions and they were sitting on the road. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam prohibited them from sitting on the road. They said, "O Prophet of Allah, that we gather and we discuss." In certain other narrations, it says the discussions were religious discussions. In other words, beneficial discussions. So then the Prophet ﷺ says, if it's really necessary for you to gather like this, in Cape Town we have a colloquial term, we call it blooming. Have you heard that term, or is it archaic? Archaic means like ancient. When I was young, then we used to say bloom. You guys don't use that anymore? No. It can't be, I can't be that old. It can't be that archaic. It must. Shukran. Thank you. Blooming basically means to hang out, to chill. What's the word in vogue for that? What's the conventional term for blooming? You know, on Eid night, you go to the waterfront and you stand there. That's called blooming. What do you call that? Like in today's time? Chilling, hanging out. You know, so the Prophet ﷺ is saying that if you need to bloom, if you need to chill, if you need to hang out, if you need to be there, So they're giving him every assurance that we hear and we are, the content of our discussion is a good content. So the Prophet ﷺ says to them that, look, if it's necessary that you have to congregate like this, and then fulfill the rules of the road. So if a person says and makes an argument that social media, WhatsApp is indispensable for me. So it is as if the Sharia is going to accede to that. Look, if you need to be on WhatsApp, fine. But when you engage on WhatsApp, maintain the proper etiquette in terms of do's and don'ts, and in terms of ideally stick to what is recommended and what's not recommended. Stick to the suaveness which Islam places upon you, and the gentility and the ladiness that Islam prescribes for you. So that would be very important. So just in a nutshell, what is the Prophet ﷺ saying? He says, look, if you need to congregate in this manner, then do a number of things. The one he says is lower your gaze. And how appropriate is that not? Things pop up on our screens and so forth. Things come our way when we're on social media. Protect your gaze, number one. Number two is prevent any harm. Don't be a means of harm to others, and don't cause yourself harm at the same time. La darara wa la dirar. Don't harm somebody else, and don't reciprocate harm. Don't be, if you can't be a benefit to others, don't be a harm to them. And then the Prophet ﷺ goes on to say, call towards good and forbid from evil. So again, if a person is in a group, and the idea of being in the group is to call towards good and forbid from evil, then that's something which is meritorious, and Allah SWT knows best. The next issue, so we're now talking about necessary etiquette. I'll go through this very quickly, bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first thing, you're on social media, you receive information. So what we do is pass as received. In terms of our Islamic rule book, that's not permissible. Why? Because Allah SWT clearly tells us, إِن جَاءَكُمْ فَاسِقٌ بِنَبَإٍ فَتَبَيَّنُوا. Somebody gives you a piece of information, then verify the information firstly. And that comes in a verse of the Holy Quran, which is very important for us to keep in mind. A disclaimer there is of no consequence. There's a narration, a very interesting narration. The Prophet ﷺ says, كَفَى بِالْمَرْءِ كَذِبًا. It is sufficient to label a person as a liar. Now this is grave, a liar. أَيُحَدِّثْ بِكُلِّ مَا يَسْمَعُ. That he simply narrates everything he listens to. He hears something and he narrates it. So that's what happens, unfortunately. Sometimes we don't even read the messages completely. We assume something stands out for us somehow or the other, and we assume that this is basically what the message or the purport of the message is, and we pass it on only later to realize that we didn't even read the message. So, you know, if you're receiving messages and you're passing it on, you must read the message first, and Allah SWT knows best. The next issue, and this is maybe, I think this would be sort of be in terms of the time, the last thing that I'm going to be dealing with, bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a personal record for me. Normally not a personal record for me, it's the first time ever for me. Normally I prepare notes, and then I put the notes down, and then I don't ever look at the notes. And then afterwards I say to myself, I should have said that, I should have said that. For the first time, I actually made notes and I'm actually consulting them. Subhanallah. This is an amazing, a gathering of goodness. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. The issue which I want to talk about here is when we communicate. So how do we communicate? Right? So you want to send the person a message. So what happens is we jump in the deep end. And sometimes we even omit to greet the person. And sometimes we even omit to seek permission. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at real life and transpose that. And I think here we need to transpose whatever applies to real life, transpose that into the virtual world in terms of communication. So what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talk about? There's a unique chapter in the Quran. It's called Surah An-Nur, the chapter of light. And Umar radhiyallahu anhu said that every household needs to know the rules and regulations contained within this unique chapter of the Holy Quran, because it relates to social interaction, both within the home and also outside to the home. And it's actually quite amazing. And I think it would be a good idea in terms to socially engineer us, because we have an idea of what is socially correct and incorrect, apt and inept and so forth, whereas that might very well fly in the face in terms of Quranic etiquette. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Like a simple thing, just to give an extreme example. So we stay in one plot, my mom and I, so we're staying on the one side, my mom stays on the other side. Can I go to my mom's fridge and open and get some yogurt, which I do very often? So Quran says that's fine. Whereas maybe socially it's not, because it's not your yogurt. It's my mother's yogurt. But from a Quranic perspective, my mother's yogurt is my yogurt. So, so just as an example, we need to re-look at what's proper etiquette and what's not proper. Sometimes we consider something to be impropriety, but from a Quranic perspective, propriety, and vice versa. It's important. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides us with guidance. So I'm going to focus on this particular issue in the real space. What does the Quran tell us? Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, oh you believe, la tadkhulu buyutan ghayra buyutikum. Don't enter into a home other than your own homes. So again, space. So think about social media. You're entering into somebody's space. When you enter into somebody's space, and then there are certain rules and regulations. What is the Quranic rules and regulations? Don't enter. They called isti'nas. The word isti'nas is to seek amicability, to seek affability. So, but what Quran actually means thereby is to seek permission before you enter into somebody's home. You can't just enter into somebody's home. But the word used is unique, because you don't want to impose yourself onto somebody else. So that is the wording which Quran uses. So the first thing is you must seek permission. And the second thing also is that when you enter into somebody's home, you must greet them. So that's the first two issues. One is isti'nas, and the other one would be salam. So both, and this is not a jurisprudential ruling, but both are required. When you enter into somebody's home, to seek permission, but it doesn't mean you sought permission and the person granted you permission that you can simply go in. No. You can simply go in, yes, but that you don't have to greet now. No, Quran says you must seek permission. When permission is granted to you, then over and above that, don't take it for granted that permission is being granted, that now you don't have to greet. Now you must greet also. They are two standalone obligations. Now, my personal practice has always been that if I contact somebody, like say I want to call somebody, and I find this works wonderfully. Assalamu alaikum. I trust that you are well. Let me know when is a good time to call or to message. So sometimes the person would respond immediately and say, look, give me 5 minutes. So he's maybe, or she's maybe in the middle of something. Allow them 5 minutes. In other words, I am almost guaranteed their full attention, because now I'm communicating with you, and I'm communicating sort of on your grounds and my grounds. I find that is very, very important and Allah SWT knows best. Now, so we looked at the ruling. The next thing which is important for me would be the response. Now, we're talking about real life now, and we're transposing that into the virtual platform. Okay, this will be the last slide now. Inshallah, we have 0 minutes left. The response is important. From a Quranic perspective, if you visit somebody and you seek permission, and in today you seek permission in a number of ways. You come and you press the bell. Pressing the bell is a form of communication. Pressing the bell actually means I hereby seek permission to enter into your abode. That's what pressing the bell means. It's an example I'm thinking now from a logic point of view. In logical studies, you have communication, but communication that there's no wording to it. Like you step out here and you get to a red traffic light. So the red traffic light, there's no verbal communication. But what does it mean? It means stop. So when you're pressing the bell, it's like, I hereby seek permission to enter into your abode. You can get one of 3 responses. The first one would be welcome. The person picks up and says, Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum salam. Who's there? Muhammad, welcome. Everybody okay? Come on. The next one is that, Assalamu alaikum, this is not a good time. Would you take exception to that? In our current environment, I think that you would take exception to it. But Quran says, إِن قِيلَ لَكُمُ ارْجِعُوا فَارْجِعُوا هُوَ أَزْكَى لَكُمْ. If it is said to you, you come to somebody and it's not the best of times, and the person tells you, look here, this is not the best of time, don't take offense. If the person requests in a nice way, come back at another time, or maybe you contact somebody and say, look, this is not a good time. Don't take offense to it. Quran says it's better for you. Now, okay, there's one of that. We had somebody read English at one of our classes in Bookab, and a word like that appeared. So he read like, and when he came to the word, he said, swa word, and he went on. A difficult word. So he was reading the English, and when it comes to a word that he can't pronounce, he says, difficult word, and he continues to read. This is an interesting word. It says tergiversation, right? This is what Quran talks about in relation to number 2. Look, the one is speaking the truth, and the truth of the matter is, look, the person who's seeking permission to enter into your home, he doesn't know what the dynamic is within the home. It might not be the best of times. So what you could do is, you could tell the person the truth and be forthright with the person. Quran tells you that is better in the long run. But what you could also do is what that term refers to. And despite the fact not the best of times, but you don't want to hurt the person's feelings, you welcome him into your home in what is in the real dynamic, not the most appropriate of times. So Quran here actually encourages you to speak the truth and avoid tergiversation. In other words, like, creating a situation where both you and the guest, you're uncomfortable, and as a result, the guest is also going to be uncomfortable. Obviously, you need to take everything else into consideration. You can't bring this argument when your parents are at the door. You with me? So within measure, Quran actually supports a forthright, honest approach to relationships. And that's better for relationships in terms of the long run. And so those 2 things are juxtaposed to each other, truth. And then what about no response? And this is the most interesting thing for me. That if you come to somebody's house, right, Islamic etiquette, and you ring the bell, once, twice, thrice, that much we know. I think what was like revelation for me was, we all know that if you come to somebody's house, you must knock thrice, isn't it? Isn't it? And after the 3rd time, you need to turn around and leave, right? The revelation for me was, between the first ringing of the bell and the second one, you must wait for the duration it takes to perform 4 units of prayer. That's quite long. And the reason is because you might have rung the bell and the person just started praying. So allow him to finish his prayer, and then you ring again, and then you ring again. So if you rung thrice and nobody responds, what must you do? You simply leave. And there's a narration in that particular regard. Abu Musa al-Ashari, he came to Umar, he did that, he knocked thrice, and then he turned and left. Umar afterwards, somebody said, how come you left? He said, no, the Prophet ﷺ taught us that you ring thrice, if there's no response, you leave. Is it problematic From an Islamic perspective, if you go to somebody, you knock thrice, and then you have to leave. It's not a problem. If I transpose that to social media, for me, that one refers to when you message somebody and they blue tick you. So now, can you have a problem with somebody blue ticking you? He blue ticked you, which means that what the blue tick tells you, again, this is a non-verbal communication. Because blue tick tells you he read my message, which is not necessarily true. It could be that the phone is not with him, it's with somebody else. Kids are playing with the phone. But generally, a blue tick means he read the message. So in other words, if you come knocking by a person, so you knock thrice. After the third time, like Abu Musa Ashari is supposed to, turn away and move. No problem. The relationship is still intact. But if you message somebody and he blue ticks you, then it's a big problem. It shouldn't be as big a problem as you make it out to be. If you come to somebody and I greet, so for example, I greet you now, Assalamu alaikum, and you don't respond, then in that instance, if you were to complain to the Prophet ﷺ, he would tell you, perhaps the person was preoccupied. And therefore, though you spoke to him directly. So likewise, a person may blue tick you, but is unable to actually respond. So maybe he read your message, but is unable to respond to you. There's no Quranic verse that says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, oh you believe, don't blue tick. Are you with me? Actually, we find to the contrary, that if somebody sends you a message, or you send somebody a message, and they blue tick you, they're not religiously obligated to respond to you. Particularly in terms of social media, you don't know the space that the other person finds themselves in. And it's exactly the same. When you come to knock on somebody's house, you don't know what is transpiring within the house. So have the good thought and just relax. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. And I think we'll stop there, bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I think what we discussed today was basically just principles and perhaps rules, and just an alternate configuration of how to look at social media. And using that now, you can try and somewhat navigate the space. And I think maybe the most important point for me was that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent us down a complete way of life, which governs us in all aspects. And to end off, I think it's encapsulated most beautifully by the statement of Salman al-Farsi when he was told that your messenger even taught you how to relieve yourselves. He says, yes, he even taught us how to relieve ourselves. So by extension, everything else. The Prophet ﷺ, we have social media, which is a novel way of communicating. We've always been communicating. But we find that within our tradition, in terms of Quran and Sunnah, we would find principles, rules and regulations that will enable us to optimally, and to me, like gentlemen and like ladies, that will enable us, if we follow those etiquette, then we would be the ultimate gentleman and the ultimate lady in terms of navigating the social place. May Allah grant us the tawfiq. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Muhammad. Sheikh Irshaad is going to come on next, but before he comes back, can I just get a show of hands who has questions in the audience? Not many? Okay, so it gives us an indication, so Sheikh Irshaad can have maybe a few extra minutes, but I do also have some questions that people have asked and sent through. So, bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakumullah khairan. I really benefit from Maulana Muhammad's company, and now I've benefited from the content as well. Allah reward him and accept. I got through about 20% of my content in the first session, so I'm going to change that up now, inshallah ta'ala. I want to leave off on a bit of a positive note. Because we also need some ways in which we can actually avoid all of these things and practically get through. So there are certain genuine benefits with social media that we cannot deny, and we as an ummah, we should pursue them. The Prophet ﷺ said, part of a hadith, ihris ala ma yanfa'uk. Right? Be eager for that which benefits you. So if there's real benefit within social media, within the usage of social media, then that's where we need to hang out and use it to our greatest advantage. So what are those genuine benefits? My personal benefit number one is access to scholars. Since my days of being a formal student till now, one of the greatest pleasures of social media is that I can be in contact, constant contact with my teachers. For some of them, like the late Mufti Taha rahimahullah ta'ala, we wouldn't speak that often, but we were able to communicate, and when we did, it was valuable. And it saved me a trip. And now I can constantly be in contact with the likes of our Ustad Maulana Muhammad, for example. But there's an intentional contact. It's only going to be a genuine benefit if we what? If we seek it out. Scholars are busy, yes. But scholars, those who are close to Allah, people who are sincere and they're there for service, they often don't mind being contacted, as long as it's reasonable and within reasonable hours and via reasonable means. And I think all my friends and so forth, we have, there's a few people who would regularly call us. Like one of the attendees was saying that her cousin from Canada is here. That's one such person. My sister lives in Canada now, but she regularly contacts because she has questions. She follows the Shafi madhab. She doesn't really have, but they stay in contact with, okay, in her case, me, but for normal people, scholars. So have scholars, be in contact with them. And of course, you can also access their videos and so on. Which brings me to my next point. It's not wrong to watch lectures and stuff on YouTube. If you are going to watch something, you might as well, get some benefit. But what I would advise, and this is going to sound like I've been paid to say this, but wallahi, I haven't. I would advise that you use platforms such as Seeker's Guidance. Because it's not random any longer. It's structured. We spoke about misplaced information. This is well-placed information. It's already thought through. You already know you can rely upon it. There's reliable scholars, inshallah. You already know it's been verified. It's been checked. There's a process. You already know that it's divided into madhahib. So if you have a Hanafi question, mathalan, you ask that it be answered according to the Hanafi school. And likewise, if it's a Shafi'i question, you ask that it be answered according to the Shafi school. That's in one sense. Then there's courses. And it's not like random courses. There's nothing wrong with taking random courses also, but our knowledge must be to take the basics before we take the intermediate, before we take the advanced. The principle is espoused in the Quran. Kunu Rabbaniyin. Right? That's how we study. That command isn't only for, formal scholars. We are all scholars in the sense of students seeking. And then you become inshallah, one day you can become a scholar, where other students sort of refer to you. But in the sense of being tullab, we are all tullabul ilm, or we should be, right? Because it's a duty upon every Muslim. So access to scholars is tremendous, but the structured access is important, right? Perhaps you're attending a course, and then for the extra details, you ask questions to the scholar, mathalan, right? It's not just, Malana, is this halal? Send them an ingredient sticker or something like that. That's not the only thing. It's also deeper than that. It's not always fatawa. Sometimes it's about genuine advice. Sometimes it's mashura, right? Good advice is so valuable. And there are people who can genuinely give you good advice. And they don't mind being approached. Again, to a degree. But this allows us that opportunity. And we have access to scholars who we otherwise would not have had access to. Really, it's amazing. Like you can wallahi, I was thinking of a solid example early on, and then I got a Telegram message that Sheikh Sadiq Ghursi's class is live now. So I could join that class. That's amazing. But we need to take advantage of those opportunities. Just like we'll be questioned for the wrong things that we do, I think we'll also be questioned for the golden opportunities that we missed. Like, why didn't you learn? What excuse did you have? You lived in 2022. Before 50 years ago, think about what it would take to become an Islamic scholar. There was no such courses available locally. Not one. That's mad. You don't even need to leave your home. I walk like a meter to my office, from my bed to my office. Then I sit there for the day, answering questions and teaching classes. but it goes all over the world, and it's amazing. It's like to be part of that, alhamdulillah. But I think we have a responsibility to take this and make good use of it. And then again, don't forget what I said earlier on. It's min al-qalb ila al-qulub. So don't divorce yourself from human contact and from real contact. Then there's opportunities for goodness. Simple example, family comes together, everybody reads a khatam, everybody reads a juz towards a khatam, and then they make a niyyah for it. Those are good things, obvious things. But people have done incredible things via social media. We were witness to one such example locally. One of our senior scholars, their home burned down a while ago, and then what happened after that in terms of goodness was unbelievable. Right? Generosity of the ummah from across the world, even smaller events and bigger events. Our ummah is an incredible ummah. We have amazing passion and compassion. We just need to be able to focus our energies in the right way and with the right intention, right? And without the credit seeking and those type of things. If we're really not in it for self-gain, there's so many opportunities for good, whether it be in terms of charity, in terms of good deeds, or something as simple as this. I'm going to tell you a secret I have. Every now and then, I would take some time out, and I especially do this when I go on Hajj or Umrah. I would take some time out and write a personalized message, almost very personalized, but it's a bit more general than that, and I will change it each and every time to the specific person, and I'll go through my phone book to send to not only my close friends, but even friends that are slightly removed from that. Because I want to take some time out to think about that person, because that's a form of doing a good deed. And you can do that like hundreds and thousands of times. But that's not the Eid Mubarak or Jummah Mubarak message that you send on a Thursday night. It's just like forward to my entire broadcast list and things like that. Those things I don't even open, because generally we just, it's just a simple thing. But that's neither here nor there, right? Those are opportunities for good that I think are for beginners. Jummah Mubarak, Eid Mubarak, right? There's not really much that goes into that. I'm not saying it's wrong, but there's so much more you could do with this tool, right? Let me send my hadith of the day, and then close that, open up my game, and then I'm set for the day. So we need to be creative about the opportunities for goodness and capitalize on those opportunities, right? A friend is doing something whereby people can buy electricity, but they buy the units, and then that unit gets donated to people who don't have money to pay for electricity. People are doing amazing things in this sense. Access to loved ones, barakallahu fikum. Access to loved ones, right? Now people can live in other countries and still be in contact, right? And now the idea of ziyarah, even though you cannot do a full, proper in-person visit, say to your uncle or your auntie or your great uncle or your grandpa, which would be the proper sunnah, right? If you cannot do that, you can still do some of that. But I find that strangely enough, despite the ability to be doing this in such a grand scale, I think we do it way less. I could imagine that we're so connected that we would constantly be in communication with relatives, distant relatives. No, that's actually not the case. Like relatives, some people live in a different country and they don't speak to each other for like weeks, months go by, because you just know that they're a phone call away. So Allah knows best. Access to work. This is seriously creating employment opportunities for so many. And I think it's a healthy way, because for a Muslim, it's a field that's kind of a necessity, what we call a necessary vice. We have to get into the somehow or the other. So we might as well make the best use of that opportunity. And if you can gain an income, which some people are doing, whether it be advertising, broadcasting to your friends, family, etc., that you're doing a particular business, or whether it's an actual online business, if it's good, it's beneficial, right? Then why not? And then finally, as demonized as it sounded earlier on in my first presentation, the idea here is to balance it out by saying that access to information is priceless. if you hear some of the stories of even our own teachers, right? And how much sacrifice they had to make to gain access to books that I carry around on my phone and I can access it anytime. It's mind-boggling. You know, you can have a library on your personal computer. So that's invaluable. But the mistake that we make is we think that this is a replacement for formal learning, and it's not. So now, unfortunately, a person will be misled into thinking that he or she is knowledgeable. I've done my research. You heard that one before? I've done my research and I found that this, that, and the other. Yeah, akhi. Reading a couple of articles and watching a couple of YouTube videos, that's not research, right? So it's valuable. It just needs to be put in its proper place. And that is essentially what wisdom is. وَضَعُ الشَّيْءِ فِي مَحَلِّهِ is knowing how to position something, placing it in its proper place. It requires taqwa, it requires maturity, and it requires tawfiq min Allah. But we can navigate this space. But more importantly, we need to understand we are responsible by Allah to actually navigate that space. We are not alone when we scroll. Allah is watching us. Allah knows what we are doing. And that's what we need to keep in front of our eyes. Jazakumullah khairan. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. I take it we're going into the questions now, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Irshaad. Before I get into the Q&A, I just want to mention that this is an event by Seekers Guidance. It's the Global Islamic Seminary. And like Sheikh Irshaad mentioned, one of the benefits of social media being access to scholars. That's what Seekers Guidance allows. But this type of event is also important for people to connect. So we have Sheikh Muhammad and Sheikh Irshaad. They're from our community. They're, scholars born from this community. Their bios are long, so I cannot read all of the information. But what I will say is that they both studied with the late Mufti Taha Karan, known to many of us as Maulana Taha. Sheikh Irshaad is the Khatib at the Mowbray Masjid, and Sheikh Muhammad is the co-imam at the Awal Masjid in Burkap, alongside our beloved Sheikh Ismail Lant. And mentioning this is important, that Seekers Guidance has a number of scholars all across the world teaching a number of courses, but they're local in their own communities as well. So like I said in the very beginning, there are these critical seminars in different parts of the world at the moment: Canada, Turkey, the UK, and South Africa. And during the first break we had today, someone came to me and said, how does Seekers Guidance do what they do? Because everything is free. So you all have flyers that you found when you came in today, with all the detail about Seekers Guidance does. So there are these seminars. There are scholars that teach on a daily basis. They teach structured courses, and we have a youth curriculum. We have an Arabic program, and we have many courses that are available for free. So how does that happen? It happens by people like yourself who are monthly donors. So if you are able to, whether you're here today or whether you're streaming live, if you are able to support with a small monthly donation, those monthly donations add up, and that's what allows all of this to happen. Alhamdulillah. So it's really the investment of people around the world who contribute to make these courses and all the other forms of learning available to many people. So in Cape Town, we're lucky, we're somewhat unique, that we have scholars everywhere, right? And they're very accessible. Even classes, now post-COVID, we can go to a class almost any night in the week. But there are people that don't have that in their cities and in their countries. And at Seekers Guidance, we receive testimonials all the time from people because if it wasn't for this access, they would not be able to learn Islam. Um, so that was our first question about how do we do this. We do this by monthly donors. Those are the people that really support the organization and all the work, alhamdulillah, that we're able to do. Before I go into the questions related to today's seminar, just a few small things, small points I want to mention. The topic is, social media from an Islamic perspective, but many people, I'm sure you know, grapple with social media just as a human being, right? From whatever faith they may come. So all of us are grappling with this. All of us are trying to navigate this. It's very difficult, but it's not impossible, right? And there are different things that we can do to not let it consume us, right? But where Islam is concerned and what the scholars have covered today, I would think that it's a lot of information they've given us for the past 4 hours, and it's things for us to ponder over. When we go home this evening, it's very likely that our social media habits won't change immediately. So what we did yesterday, we'll probably still do tomorrow, but it's things for us to think about and things for us to consider because it really affects all of us. So if you have questions, now's the time. Others, I'll go to questions that came in online. No questions, okay. So one question that came in, which I'm sure many of you have, even though you're not asking, is, and any of the scholars can take this, at what age should a young child in a Muslim home be given a smartphone? So,
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. That's quite a difficult question. So I think I'll take the easy route out and just focus on the principle behind it. So the principle behind it is that your child who's coming to you, his request is, I want a smartphone. So the child is what we refer to in Arabic as a mawla, I think it is, but you are the wali. In other words, you the guardian. So from an Islamic perspective, the guardian is responsible for the person that he's been placed in charge of. So that's important. And you've been given the wilaya. For example, if a lady wants to get married, so she needs the permission of the wali, the guardian. So he's been given that position, but with that position comes a responsibility. And the responsibility, why isn't he being given that rank? Because he's considered to have the goodwill of his charge uppermost in his mind and his heart. So when your child comes to you and asks for a phone, the first thing that will come to me is that the child is asking me why, because I'm the wali. And I have to make the right decision for the child. That's very important, because legally speaking, the child doesn't have the competency to make that decision themselves. Because the child doesn't consider to be having that capacity. It's very important to understand. Your child goes to school and takes the Lego set as one set. That Lego set maybe cost 500 rands. Genuine Legos are expensive nowadays. So the child goes to school and then his friend says, I will exchange 2 for 1. You give me the 1 Lego set, I'll give you 2 lollipops. And he barters and he trades. That sale, is it valid or not? The sale is invalid from the very outset. Why? Because the contracting party, who's the child, doesn't have the capacity to contract. So that sale is null and void from the outset. The child doesn't know what is beneficial for the child. And therefore, the child isn't granted that capacity. So now the onus, the responsibility is on you. Many people, the child asks you for a phone. You say, what can I do? The child's asking me for the phone. Nobody's nagging for the phone. He's this, he's that. If you understand your wilaya, you know that Like, you know, the old people used to say in Cape Town, "Ma idea willy." The child doesn't have a will, but the child wanted to, you say. No, that's irresponsible parenting. So in that particular light, you need to know that whatever is going to happen to the child is a consequence of you giving the child a smartphone, but Allah is going to hold you responsible for it. I give you a tricky situation, and sometimes we're not comfortable with this because for whatever reason it may be. But I think, I mean, this is if you look at Islamic law and you look at other law. If you if you deal with a minor in a particular way, you can't blame the minor. The law is not going to listen to you. Islamic law is the same. When I was very much younger, people used to, I don't know where I got the answer from, but I used to be faced with this tricky question. People used to ask me, I don't know if you guys remember that. I'm sorry, not you guys. It's a formal platform. I don't know if you people remember Mia's Farm. Mia's Farm. So there was this connotation attached to Mia's Farm. If you're naughty, you're going to Mia's Farm. Okay? So we didn't go to Mia's Farm. We went to Zakaria. It's like the brother of, you know. So people wanted to know, elderly people would ask me, tell me, did you go out of your own or you forced to go? So now what happens is, if I say I went out of my own, that would be an outright lie because I didn't go out of my own. And then if I say I was forced to, then I'm compromising my father, because now, how does that look? My father forced me to go against my will. So some of the other, Allah put it in my heart to say, look, my father took a decision for me when I was unable to make my own decision. And you follow me? Because I'm so grateful for him for actually taking that, what's the name? But it takes parents to man up, to take that responsibility and not abdicate the responsibility and blame it on the children, that the child doesn't have capacity, but then you blame it on the child, but you're not fulfilling your responsibility in that particular regard. So that's very, very important. When your child comes to ask you for a phone, you're the wali. He doesn't have complete, as a child, so in other words, he's aqil. He may have intellect, but it's limited, and he's not physically mature, and therefore is unable to stand on his own 2 feet. So you need to make the right decision when they are unable to make the decision for them. I'll give you, just to end off on this particular example, I see Buta Omar at the back is listening very attentively. So Sheikh Yusuf Al-Qaradawi, a lady asked the question. The question was that, look, my husband doesn't allow me to pray. Married Muslim lady, my husband doesn't allow me to pray. So if somebody were to ask you that question, what would your response be? What's wrong with him? That's very nice. Sheikh Al-Qaradawi. But he didn't say what's wrong with him. Sheikh Yusuf Al-Qaradawi wanted to know, who's the lady's wali? Who's the guardian that handed her over in marriage to this person who now doesn't allow her to pray? What I'm trying to impress upon you is the responsibility of the wali. And I've seen many instances, when it comes to marriage, the same, like it's exactly the same principle. When your child wants a phone and you give them the phone, and then that's their thing, that's I hope the word is right, you abdicating your responsibility. What happens when it comes to a suitor? Then the father, he says, no, they're going to handle it. In other words, the mother and the daughter. No matter what red flags goes up, he says, no, the mother and the daughter. Or maybe initially he plays a proactive role, but then, they overrule him. And then he just lets the ball down. You're answerable in the court of Allah. Because Allah SWT has placed that person in your responsibility. So the children, when they're young, then the question really needs to be reconfigured. My child wants a phone, what do I do? It's more like, do you want to give your child a phone or not? The responsibility is squarely yours. And the consequence of it is also squarely yours. Therefore, it's unique also that from an Islamic perspective, if you give a gift, if I give you a gift, can I take it back? No, I can't. The Prophet ﷺ likens it to, and excuse me for this example, a dog vomiting and then licking up that vomit. You can't. If you give a gift, you can't take it back. And there's a whole lot of other rules related to that. But if I give a gift to my son, my child, can I take it back? Absolutely. Because there's bigger considerations. So let's say, for example, you did give the child a phone and bought it. It's your phone, it's your contact, you're paying for it. Allah is going to hold you responsible for it. And Allah knows best. Yes. Mm. Mm. I think it's a, I think you're giving us an answer and lot to think about more than a question in terms of, look, if it does come to a point whereby, you need to, so in other words, it's perhaps not as cut and dry as I'm giving you a phone, not giving you a phone. What can happen is that you can, if you look at the phone as very neutral, but then you can have rules and regulations that regulate the usage of the phone. And in terms of some of the work that we've been looking at, it's perhaps maybe impractical to deprive a child of the phone. So, certain isolationist approach. Cut you off from a phone, how long can you do that? There's a time and place for that. But rather it's about insulating them from the harms of the phone. So in other words, how do you use the phone responsibly? So you can put many things like that in place, whereby you can only use the phone for a certain time. You can't have the phone alone in the room. Like if you want to use the phone, use it in a public space. Mom and dad must have access to it. And now that you know that it's not really a neutral thing, that they can fall prey to, all of these things. What happens? I think it's very important with kids, and that's one of the messages that I read. To deprive somebody, you see, your children, if you, other than the rules cut and dry, your child must know that you love them. Your child must know that you have the goodwill at heart. And sometimes you need to communicate that to them so that they know the hard decisions that you're making, it's basically in their best interest, because you can maybe see what they can't see right now. So when you can't have like no relationship with the kids and then grab the phone and rules and regulations and all of that. But when they know, like we have this whole idea of, I need to spend so much time with my kids. It's a debatable issue. Time up. Yeah, it's a debatable issue. Not the time up. The time up is categorical. The time is up. But we'll enough now, inshallah. If you do, make sure that your children know that you love them. Right? As a father, your daughter must know that you love them. You might not be able to spend all of the time with them and everything, but you love them and you have the goodwill at heart. And your actions must prove that. It doesn't necessarily mean that you spend the whole time with them. But if you have this basis in terms of a relationship, they know you have your goodwill at heart, and you've proven that you have the goodwill at heart, number one. Number two is they know and you've proven in terms of your condition, not your tongue. Your condition tells them that you love them. Then it's very easy for you to make hard decisions and for them to accept it. But if you don't have that, then your hard decisions, it actually has the opposite effect. May Allah protect and guide us. There's a nice quote in the book that we've been consulting called The Fiqh of Social Media. I'm sure it's available online. We downloaded it. There's some nice stuff that we spoke about now that's there. If you are a parent and dealing with these particular issues, may Allah bless and accept. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Muhammad. Sheikh Muhammad has a habit of reading my messages. I think I have to tweak them for the next one, inshallah. There's okay, before I go to the online questions, is there any questions from? Yes. Okay, inshallah, we'll follow up. Okay, Jazakallah khair, appreciate it. We'll definitely follow up on that. The next question is something we all actually experience. It says, where should we begin? We struggle with our own usage as adults. How can we help our families and children?
Assalamu alaikum. I actually have a slide on this, but I'm not going to go through the whole slide. I just want to show you the slide, inshallah, because I think it's important that we have an action plan, a really practical action plan. Firstly, what Mullah Muhammad started off with was have an intention. It may seem silly, but innamal a'malu binniyat. It may sound cliche, but look here, when you pick up your phone and you're scrolling, what is my niyyah? What am I doing here? What am I looking for? You know? If you have a purpose, bismillah, go for it. But the problem is sometimes we just end up mindlessly scrolling because there's a void that we want to fill. And that's a problem because that void is what brought us to Allah at times. You know, it brought us to reading at times. It brought us to speaking with our wives at times, husbands, and it brought us to having quality time with our kids. But now we fill that void with the endless scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. We don't actually have a purpose for scrolling. Like the last time we actually got a genuine, message from somebody was like 3 days ago. we check the apps all the time. That's a problem. It means we have a hole and we're trying to fill that hole with something else. But that's a hole that needs to be filled with Allah. That's the bottom line. Unplug. Okay. So intention in Islam, silence is silver. Why? What's golden? A good word. Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir falyakul khayran aw liyasmut. Right? Whoever believes in Allah in the last day, say something good or be quiet. So it's not that you discourage. If you've got good things to say, speak to your family, your friends, your loved ones, have good conversations. It's fine. But the moment you no longer have something good to say, shh, better. Avoid the evils of the tongue, the riba and all of that. Unplug, notifications, downtimes, uninstall. What does unplug mean? Get rid of the apps that you don't actually use. Nobody actually goes onto your LinkedIn account who speaks to you there. Delete it. You just heard about Twitter, you've got it, you've got an account, you don't actually delete it. If you limit yourself, I'm only you. Now it's not just WhatsApp, it's WhatsApp plus Telegram and this and that. And just choose one, have certain principles. Don't just do. Notifications, turn them all off. You can go into the app and still check if you've got messages. You don't have to have notifications pushing through to your phone. Downtimes, have rules. Supper time, eating time, anytime around the table, no phones, no screens. As an example, every family is different, right? Check your screen time. This is problematic because I have got probably the highest screen time of anybody in this room, but I know I can govern what my screen time, is there for. It's kind of part of my work. But if my screen time is like 4 hours and that's just like WhatsApp and Facebook and stuff, that's a problem. Uninstall what you don't need. Unfollow the groups, lists, people, unsubscribe, get out of the stuff that you don't need. Just keep the stuff you need. Get rid of the fluff. Prioritize. Ask yourself sometimes at night, sure, imagine I could be reading a juz of the Quran right now. Supplement. Downtime with intention. Like, I'm going to make more time for my marriage. I'm going to make more time for meeting my friends. I'm going to go and pay Mullah Muhammad a visit. Right? I have a sister there with him and a cup of coffee. So much better than scrolling on my phone. And then have a heart-to-heart ilm, go to classes. Right? There were people today in that dilemma, they said, I can go there or I can chill in bed and watch the seminar online. They're all thinking, oh, okay, that's me, what happened? It's fine, but also go to classes. Have heart-to-heart. That's all. Barakallahu fikum. Jazakumullah khairan.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Irshaad. Any questions from the crowd? Yes? Jazakallah khair. So the sister, for just for the sake of the live stream, the sister was asking, if parents have children who are eligible for marriage, and they'd like for these children to communicate with other marriage eligible people on WhatsApp and things. Should that be allowed? Because some parents have the view that it's better that way than these young kids or young adults meeting each other out in the public. That actually ties into another question we got online, and the scholars can answer both together. The question that came through online was uh, um, adult men and women who are just conversing in a friendly manner online, but it's not for any particular good purpose, nor is it for any professional purpose like work. Is that allowed? And what does Islam say about that? So inshallah, both I think we can answer together.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. To be very honest with you, the second question, I've did some sort of like research on there, but I haven't come to something conclusive in that particular regard. The first question about, you find that there are two people and they seem to be a good match and they start connecting to one another on the social media space. One of the challenges of social media is that it fast forwards things dramatically, which also impacts in terms of relations. So whereas if you wanted to come to know somebody in real time, then it would take a long time. But now because of social media and the dynamics of social media, what can happen is that you can know like the ins and outs of somebody like almost instantaneously in that particular. Why I'm mentioning that is because from an Islamic perspective, this is my understanding in terms of what the procedure should be like. Meeting somebody, like meeting a prospective spouse, that really is the last procedure in all of the procedures. So in other words, the compatibility and eligibility and suitability and all of those things need to actually be determined before A meets B. And once from both people's side that is already determined, then now the platform can be opened for them to meet. So the challenging thing about that situation would be, so a person says no, but there's no khalwa. In other words, they're not alone because they're not in a real space. So yes, you can draw that distinction between the real life, that there's no khalwa, so you can't deem it to be impermissible. But then from another perspective, one thing leads to another thing. So for that, from that type of approach, at the very least, I would say now that would not be recommended, and Allah SWT knows best. Then there's one of the things about the social media platform is the way you're able to project yourself. You can project a certain image of yourself, and that is basically who you think you are. You may actually think that is you, but it's maybe not you. And then when it comes to marriage in particular, certain things from a fiqh perspective is actually prohibited. Let's say for a married lady according to our school of thought, it's fine for her to thin out her eyebrows, right? But for a non-married lady, particularly when a suitor is coming to her, it is considered to be a form of deception. So I don't want to mention that. What I'm saying is that to meet on social media and all of these type of things, where the projection is more important than what the real dynamic is, I wouldn't advise going along those ways. So there's two answers to your question. The one is that meeting the person is the last step, really. You need to cover everything else. And I think this is important because particularly for the lady, because now a lady meets, she commits, but this brother is basically checking out a number of ladies, but so the meeting should be the last thing really in this regard. That's number one. Number two is the platform lends itself to deception. So ideally it should be done the traditional way we meet from person to person, and Allah SWT knows best.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Muhammad. Any more questions on the floor? No. Okay, there's one coming through. Someone is typing on WhatsApp, so it's going to come through in a second. And then this will be, inshallah, the last question, and then inshallah we'll close with just some final words, and Sheikh Muhammad inshallah will make a dua. Still typing. Alhamdulillah. Okay. So the question is, how do we fulfill our religious obligation of correcting sins on social media?
That is a very beautiful question, mashallah. That is a very, very beautiful question. Subhanallah. Tawbah, as classic as it may be, contains the steps that we need to take. This is the beauty about Islam. To others it may seem ancient, but it is eternally applicable. It just requires a bit of insight and wisdom and knowledge. So, inshallah, let's learn together. What are the rules of Tawbah? To stop the sin, then to regret the sin. Okay, before we get to regret the sin, promise Allah that you won't return to the sin. Number 2. Then remorse. Remorse. It's a big one. Right? Now remorse means you must feel bad for the sin. And it's, if people make it out to be like this is a bad thing to feel bad. No, we need to feel bad sometimes. You must feel bad for having done that sin. In other words, it's not that you're living in the past, it's just you feel ashamed of it. You have regret. So a person who feels like that won't talk about the good old days. Do you remember the good old days? But they mean specifically thereby when we were disobedient. You with me? So that's problematic. And similarly, if you're keeping photographs of your days of Jahiliyyah, as we all call it, and you're displaying it there publicly and so on, that's an intention. You've made a decision. Oh, look at me in the club in 2000 with my homies, you know? It goes against Tawbah. And then the last one is, that's weird. It's like I was there. Like what Malana explained the other day. The last one is, if it has to do with the rights of others, then return their rights. And there's a beautiful one in this as well. Because I think that as a species, we somehow think that we can say it online. And we will. Things that we would never say in person. I don't think anyone would go and stand in front of a respected scholar who makes a mistake and his image is tarnished online. The type of comments that I've read, I don't think people would be willing to say those things in person. So what gives them the confidence to say it online? You with me? So that's Dhul Wajhain. The Prophet ﷺ spoke about this two-faced person. To the people you are one, and you know. So Allah save us. That is the answer, right? Make a digital tawbah. Just follow the steps of tawbah, and that is the way you can rectify that, inshallah. It's very difficult because now, again, like Mullah Muhammad says, you also see your loved ones, you know, and you publicizing of sins and things like that. It's problematic. In the Sunnah, the Prophet said, you know, Allah will forgive everyone until they expose their own sins. And people celebrate it. So I think that is the best way forward. It's from the classical definition of Tawbah. You can find that in Riyadus Salihin. Imam Nawawi explains this in Kitab Tawbah, right at the beginning, the 4 steps of Tawbah. Very important lesson. Allah grant us the tawfiq to make through Tawbah. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Bismillah. So just for the streaming, the question is, what do the scholars say about YouTubers, essentially? People who, build their careers on YouTube, just talking about their day, vlogging, etc.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think there's a number of considerations that you can have. Ad-dalu ala al-khayri kafa'ilihi. A person who indicates to something is like the person who did it. So, whatever the person may do, and the person now projects it, other people follow him. The person has a responsibility in that particular regard. So that's I think the very simple answer in that particular regard. So you need to look at what the person is doing, and if it's good, and it's encouraging others to do good, then the person will share in the reward. If it's bad, and then what is encouraging other people to do is also bad. I think also we sort of, in terms of like liberalism, for example, in terms of the way we understand it, the individual and the individual rights. What the individual tells himself is that whatever I do, the benefit and harm is limited to myself. From an Islamic perspective, we don't have that particular approach. When you do something, it's everything has a consequence. Everything has a consequence. So, for example, we look at individuals. You do something, it impacts on the group dynamic. Then, also the group dynamic, it impacts on what the individual does. So, every action that we do, almost like it does have a reaction, it does have a responsibility. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the form of the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is telling us that even something we say, look, I'm only doing it if you follow, then that's up to you. No, from an Islamic perspective, the fact that you've indicated to something else, it also holds you responsible. So, when we project something out and put something that's beneficial, mashallah, tabarakallah, it's good. You were saying, for example, that some people share, they do it for advertising purposes. Sometimes people share, but they just basically share ideas. And then other people benefit from those ideas, so that can be beneficial. So, al-umur bima qasidiha. Things are by its objectives, inshallah. Barakallahu fikum.
Jazakallah khair. There are some more questions from YouTube, but I don't think we can take them because it's getting late for the people that. Okay. So inshallah we'll wrap up here. As I said earlier, this is a complex topic, and I'm sure what we've learned today will help us navigate all of this. As young people, there are some young people in the crowd. As adults with children, everyone is trying to navigate this, and the challenge is that the social media landscape keeps changing. Right? So we have TikTok right now. 2 years ago, there was no TikTok, right? Just 2 days ago, I read of a new social media app that is gaining traction, right? I won't mention the name, but it's something new. I haven't even seen what it looks like, but I read about it. So the landscape will change, and these lessons that we've learned today are fundamentals. So we need to reflect on them and sort of navigate our way as we go along, inshallah. Jazakallah khair to the people who have attended today. To the people online, I do apologize again. Streaming has only been happening for about an hour or so now, but we've been here for close to 4 hours or more than 4 hours. This is our second seminar in Cape Town from Seekers Guidance for this year. We will have at least 2 more, inshallah, before the end of the year. So, please look out on our social media and our emails for the next event. I'd like to thank our team who put this together. Our team is spread across the world. Our head of programs is in the UK. Our programs coordinator is in the United Arab Emirates. And we have our team locally. We have our scholars locally. So I thank Sheikh Muhammad and Sheikh Irshaad for these insights that they have shared with us. We have Sister Shamila from our team here and Sister Zainab as well, who's part of our internship program. So We have for the last few years been running a 6-month internship program where we allow young adults and also professionals to learn with us and serve with us. That's actually our motto. If you can, please become a monthly donor of Seekers Guidance. It helps us to put on events like this. It helps us to produce more courses for people all over the world that they can access at no cost. And please take a course. So go to seekersguidance.org, take a course. I will be honest with you, my favorite part of the Seekers Guidance offering is the Q&A. So, and I see a lot of people shaking heads. So you can go there and you can, type in any keyword and you'll find questions and answers, and they're answered by reliable scholars. I'd like to thank Academia Library for the use of their venue, and also Voice of the Cape for partnering with us on this event. Jazakallah khair. Travel safe home, and inshallah we'll close finally with a dua by Sheikh Muhammad.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه الطاهرين اللهم لك الحمد كله ولك الشكر كله وإليه يرجع الأمر كله لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك ولعظيم سلطانك اللهم ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا واغفر لنا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم اللهم ربنا تقبل منا القليل وسامحنا بالكثير ولا تؤاخذنا بالتقصير يا نعم المولى ونعم النصير اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا يا رب جمعا مرحوما واجعل تفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما لا تجعل فينا ولا منا ولا بيننا شقيا ولا محروما برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وصل اللهم وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم سبحان ربنا رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.